Okay, it's my clock just turned 7 o'clock, so we're going to get our webinar started. Welcome, everybody. I want to say a special thank you to Julie Lytle, the Executive Director of Province 1, the Episcopal Diocese of New England, for providing our platform for us to be able to meet together. Thank you, Julie. Mary Liz Murray, the Associate of All Our Children for Community and Network Development, is going to be moderating our chat room, and she'll introduce herself and her function in a few minutes. I'm Lally Lloyd. I'm Director of All Our Children, and this is the second of our monthly webinar series. We're delighted to be here with all of you. To get started, I want to first just remind the presenters to mute your phones, if you would, when you're not speaking. It'll just help to improve the quality of audio for the rest of us. I'm going to introduce our panelists. Our topic for tonight is the growth impact of partnerships on congregations. And one of the things that we'll be exploring is what are the dimensions of growth? What are the different ways that congregations can grow? What does that mean, and what have our guests here this evening observed? Let me introduce them to you. Maureen Burns, wave at the camera, Maureen. Maureen graduated from Loyola University in Chicago, where she collaborated on community-based research projects on the youth perception of community violence in that city. And this experience and her interest in youth empowerment led her to St. Stephen's Church in Boston, where she is the lead organizer of school and community partnerships. St. Stephen's has a long-standing partnership with the Blackstone Elementary School, which is directly across the street from the congregation, and it is developing in multi-dimensions lots of other partnerships with other schools. It's good to have you with us, Maureen. Zena Link, raise at the camera, Zena. Zena is a theologically trained professional educator who lives in Worcester, Massachusetts, where she worships at St. Luke's Episcopal Church. Zena's Christian vocation is to serve in the classroom. St. Luke's partners with other Episcopal churches with an education nonprofit and a public school, all in Worcester, which is a stressed urban city in western Massachusetts, as it moves into its education justice work. And Vicki Zuft is the rector of St. Paul's in Williamsville, New York, outside Buffalo. And that congregation has partnerships both with the Harris Hill Elementary School across the street and also with School 6 in downtown Buffalo. Vicki led the local planning team for her diocesan summer reading camp and also for All Our Children's Forum, which we held there in Buffalo in May. And Vicki serves on All Our Children's national leadership team. So it's good to be with us. Let me open us with prayer. This prayer was written by the Right Reverend Stephen Charleston, a member of the Choctaw Nation. Let me not look away, O God, from any truth I should see. Even if it is difficult, let me face the reality in which I live. I do not want to live inside a cosseted dream, imagining I am the one who is always right, or believing only what I want to hear. Help me to see the world through other eyes, to listen to voices distant and different, to educate myself to the feelings of those with whom I think I have nothing in common. Break the shell of my indifference, draw me out of my prejudices, and show me your wide variety. O Lord, let me not look away. Amen. All Our Children's mission is to build the movement for education justice. And we do this by supporting congregations and their members who are exploring, forming, and leading community partnerships with public schools. We do this because far too many children, many of them living in poverty and many of them children of color, receive a substandard education. And this is not God's dream. We believe Jesus showed the church how to engage our communities, how to serve children, and to challenge injustice. Our vision is of 1,000 partnerships at the local, state, and national level, supporting their members in taking action and advocating for education equity. All Our Children hosts events like this and creates and curates print, video, and online tools that you and others in your community can use at every stage of school partnership work. We connect leaders and volunteers on calls like this into a community of hope and encouragement and relationship. This evening we are gathered for our second of our fourth Tuesday webinars, so today is the 5th Tuesday of the month. For obvious holiday reasons, we postponed a week. Each month we are inviting 2 or 3 people from within our network, and we're exploring a challenge or a question about connecting a congregation with a nearby public school. We're pleased to have each of you with us this evening. Thank you for joining us. Our topic tonight is the growth impact of partnerships on congregations. We'll spend about a half an hour in a discussion between me and our 3 panelists. And then we'll have 15 minutes of Q&A. And then we'll do a very brief evaluation, and we will wrap up at 8:15. I want to introduce Mary Liz at this time, who will be moderating our chat room. And she's going to say a few words now about the role that that's going to play in our time together this evening. So over to you, Mary Liz.
Thanks, Lally. Good evening, everyone. Nice to talk to you tonight. I will be moderating the chat function, and you can find that, if you haven't already, in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. There's a box that says chat, and in parentheses it says everyone, and so that means it's open to everyone, and everyone can see and respond. While we're listening in the panel discussion, I may be posing some questions. I would love to hear questions from you all if you need clarification on anything that the panelists say, if you have a follow-up question, or if you have a question that you want to be asked in Q&A. I'll be sort of compiling those as we go, and sometimes interjecting into the conversation to make sure we're clear, and otherwise moderating things so that during the Q&A session we can correctly direct your questions to the panelists that you want to ask. I may also be throwing out an interactive poll question here or there for you all to answer so that we can know a little bit more about you all. We're really glad to have you here, and the more that we know about you and what you need, the better we can help you on your journey and learn more about Church School Partnerships. So that's who I am. You'll be hearing my voice here and there, and you'll be interacting with me in the chat box.
Thanks, Mary Liz. So we'll be hearing from 3 different perspectives this evening. Maureen has been a community organizer and now works directly between an active congregation in the south end of Boston and their schools. Zena is a teacher, and she also serves on the Executive Council of the Episcopal Church. I think I forgot to mention that in her introduction. And Vicki is both the rector of a congregation and also serves on her bishop in a number of different functions. So she also has the diocesan-wide perspective. So we've got 3 different perspectives. And we've asked each of them to give a brief introduction, about 2 or so minutes, to who you are and what you do in your partnership, being as concrete and specific as you can, and how you personally felt called to pursue partnership work in your church or diocese. So Maureen in Boston, why don't we start with you, please?
Sure.
There you go. Okay. Now we can hear you.
Yeah. Great. So thank you for the introduction, Lally. So like you said, my name is Maureen, and I am the school and community organizer with St. Stephen's Youth Programs in the South End of Boston. So in my role, I oversee all aspects of our relationship with the Blackstone. The school that we have partnerships with is the Blackstone Innovation School. It's a K-5 located across the street from St. Stephen's. And I came to this work through my work at the after-school program at St. Stephen's. So I'm really drawn to this work because of that direct role that I had working with young people. In our partnership with the Blackstone, we are integrated into the school, so we do oversee we run the library there, we coordinate support a classroom with other partner churches, we organize days of action, and then through our community and through our youth program, we are involved in a teacher meeting campaign, so we talk to all the teachers of our students that we see on a daily basis. We also do daily pickup at the school, and as we are increasing our parent engagement, we're increasing the visibility of parents within the school. Is that all your questions? Not sure I can hear you, Lally.
Lally, we can't hear you.
There we go. Maureen, would you just add a couple of words about your own personal sense of call to this particular work?
Sure. So I came to St. Stephen's directly to work in the after-school program. So when I started, I was our academic coordinator and one of the lead counselors in our after-school. So for me, it's really the personal relationship that I started working with the young people, with our elementary school students, with our teens, with their families, that called me to deepen my work in working in a partnership. So at St. Stephen's, we talk about our model in terms of a circle of care. So I really have the luxury of being able to wear two hats during most of the day, of being within the school and seeing our young people there and supporting them there, and then also seeing them in out-of-school time and be able to be a support there, and oftentimes be the connecting person and be the in-between. So to make sure that a young person's time in school and out of school is really really strong and able to provide them the care that they need every day.
Great. Thank you so much. Zena, to Worcester. Let's go to you next.
Yes, I'm Zena Link from St. Luke's in Worcester, and we're kind of at our emerging stage at our church in St. Luke's. We took a lot of time. We're a relatively small parish, between 75 to 100 parishioners each Sunday. And we have a new rector, priest in charge, actually, who's been there about a year. And we were very deliberate to assess the gifts and talents of parishioners, and we started having forums. But we didn't have that before. We started having forums between the services, between the 8 o'clock service and the 10 o'clock service, to discuss what our interests were as a church, as individuals, with our relationship with God, how we can make a difference. And our church as a whole had multiple ministries and multiple interests. But one thing continued to center around social justice and equality and some of the issues that were going on in society. So all our children seemed a natural fit because we have a very large immigrant and refugee population in the city of Worcester. In fact, Worcester is considered a hub for immigrant and refugee communities. So we partnered not only with the school. I'm an educator. I work in one of the local high schools that has a very large population of immigrant and refugee youth. We partnered with Accentria, which was previously called the Lutheran Services, and now it's called Accentra. And they work with resettlement and placement of immigrants, and they also have children and youth programs. And one of the programs in which they're very much involved with is the African Community Education Center, which works with all of the Worcester Public Schools. Students it's a large concentration of African students from various parts of Africa, but they all go to Worcester Public Schools, and that's where our relationship is and our commitment is with that organization that has multiple relationships with the Worcester Public Schools. We had 2 different opportunities that they have about 6 or 7 ways to get involved with ACE. The ones that set the needs of our church were the Leadership and Mentoring Program, because that gave multiple people in the church their ability to share their gifts. They had a commitment level of 2 to 3 months. We're still setting people up on which gifts that they will share with the youth in the African community. And we also made a commitment to their Saturday program. So as a church, we are committing to 1 Saturday out of the month. They have programs every Saturday, but we felt in order to be consistent and to meet everyone's needs, and it was the best way that we could participate.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Vicki, to you.
As Lolly said, I'm the rector of St. Paul's in Williamsville, New York. St. Paul's is known as the church the children built because it was started in World War II as an ecumenical Sunday school. When they called me here, one of the charges that the vestry gave me was to help reconnect the church with the community, and we have a elementary school directly across the street. So we've been in partnership with them. This is our 8th school year being in partnership with them. I have about 15 parishioners, including myself, who go over there once or twice a week and work with children one-on-one. I'm a part of the PTA there. We are the evacuation site for the schools, so when they do their evacuation drill, once a year we have all 600 children in our church building, which is absolutely wonderful. A year after that, we developed a relationship with Public School 6 in Buffalo for 2 reasons. First of all, because the school social worker there is a parishioner, and second of all, because we were starting to talk about wanting to reach more broadly into the wider community. And it seemed rational to do that through children, since that's our focus. School 6 in Buffalo is one of the schools that is heavily immigrant. This year we have 21 languages spoken at School 6, none of which is Spanish. So it's a wide multicultural congregation or school. And I have 12 parishioners, including myself, who work with the kindergartners at School 6. We also do weekend food. So we pack bags of food each weekend, and 98% of the school population this year is on free or reduced price lunch. And so basically every child in school is eligible to take food home with them. We have coordinated with the Food Bank of Western New York to drop food at the school. We package it, distribute it to the kids. They take it home for the weekend, because for a lot of those kids, the school lunches and breakfasts are their main food source. And so this gives them food over the weekend. We also, this will be our 6th Christmas. We give every child in the school a new book. We collect them up through Christmas and deliver them in January, because the majority of the students in the school are Muslim. So we don't give them Christmas presents. We give them Martin Luther King Day presents of new books. And the 6th year for that. What got me involved? First of all, the church wanted to connect with the community, and the school's a logical source. But my undergraduate degree is in elementary education, and I really believe that public education is the great equalizer in our country, and that if we want economic equality, it has to start with educational equality.
Thank you all for that introduction. And Vicki, staying with you for the time being, what kinds of growth, however you perceive that, have you seen at your congregation that is either directly or even indirectly related to the partnership work?
There are three kinds of growth I can identify and put some numbers to. The first is actual growth. Uh-oh. Can you still hear me?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. My screen just went blank, but that's okay. The first is congregational growth. Oh, there we go. Congregational growth in numbers. We have 4 families who I can directly connect with coming to St. Paul's because of our partnership with Harris Hill. 3 or 4 times a year, I get a call from someone who says, we don't really have a church, but our kids go to Harris Hill, and we think St. Paul's is our church, and could you bury our pet, bury our grandmother, bless our house, whatever it is. And we've gotten 4 of those families to join the church. So I can name that. And then we have a few other families who have joined because they heard about our connection with the school. The second thing is growth in the awareness of the community of our presence. We're now the top of mind awareness for the school district personnel when they think of a church. So I'm on a lot of public boards because when they have to pick somebody from the religious community, the first church the superintendent thinks of is St. Paul's. And so we get a call, and he sometimes will ask me if I can connect other clergy, but I'm the one he thinks of, and our church is the one he thinks of, and that's really great. And the same thing is starting to happen in Buffalo, that when the Buffalo schools need a suburban spokesperson, someone from the suburbs who cares about the city schools to speak, they contact us. So that's really nice. The third type of growth is growth in, I'm not sure what the right word for it is, maybe situational awareness. But because I have a lot of the same parishioners tutor at Harris Hill and tutor at School 6, they have a really great understanding of economic inequality and the segregation in our community and racial inequities that I could preach about forever and they would never understand. But they go to a 4th grade classroom at Harris Hill Elementary and there are 13 kids and they're the 4th adult. And they go to the kindergarten classroom at School 6. There are 19 kids who speak 12 languages and we're the only other adult ever in the classroom. And so I don't have to explain economic inequality. They see it. And so we can start the conversation there rather than kind of intellectually.
Maureen, I want to turn to you for a minute to build on the stories that in the examples that Vicki was just giving, because I know that one of the things that St. Stephen's has done very effectively is to build partnerships with suburban congregations, both to provide support for children at the Blackstone, but also to provide to build out the capacity of the programs that you host on site at St. Stephen's. So can you reflect, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but could you answer basically the same questions? What are the kinds of growth or the different dimensions of growth, if you will, that St. Stephen's as a congregation has experienced because of the partnerships with their schools?
Yeah, I think we have seen a lot of things that Vicki was referring to. I know when Tim, our current vicar, started, there were, I think on his first Sunday in church, there were 75 butts and pews. About half of them were members of his family, and now we have 90 families coming, or 90 people coming every Sunday. And I think that being involved in the church, being involved in the school, a neighboring school, is just one way that we're staying relevant and showing that we are a vibrant community. And to reflect specifically on your question about partner churches, so at St. Stephen's we do partner with about 60, we have a network of 60 suburban churches around the greater Boston area who work with us, especially during the summer, for our youth programming then. And as suburban parishioners are coming into St. Stephen's and to our other partner churches around the city over the summer and building relationships with the young people, if they're elementary school students, if they're teens who work for us. I think it's really that relationship piece that keeps them coming back during the school year and asking how else they can get involved. Just this past year, one of the partner churches had reached out. One of the partners in Watertown had reached out to me with interest in supporting a classroom at the Blackstone. And as they were doing their back-to-school drive, I had sent them a wish list from the kindergarten team at the Blackstone. So their community members were getting those school supplies as they were getting school supplies for their kids. And when I was picking them up from Watertown and in talking to the community member there, I was asking, like, how did you become interested in this? And she had talked about her daughter's experience as a teacher in after school in Cambridge, and the inequality that her daughter had seen as a teacher, the confines that she had felt from Common Core and things like that, and how even her daughter works with kindergartners and the STEM programming that she was able to implement with them. And so having seen her daughter's, work and relationship with her students, wanted her to reach out to her church and see how her church can get involved with education and building relationships with teachers and young people.
Mm-hmm. And to you, Zena, what kind of growth, however you might describe that, have you seen at St. Luke's?
We've seen growth in a couple of different areas, and one of the growth that I think is really important is the growth that we've had among ourselves and the relationships that we've had as parishioners with one another to kind of understand what some of our gifts are and our ability to do ministry together. And a great thing with partnering with ACE, it allows us, Worcester is it's the second largest city in Massachusetts. It has a lot of schools, and we have the opportunity to provide services for youth of all ages. So with our parishioners, some are comfortable with younger ages, some are comfortable with older ages, and we were able to get people together based on their comfort levels, which I think was very, very important. We also, when we started talking about starting a program with all our children, we partnered with All Saints, which is a church here in Worcester, and we also had discussions with St. Matthew's. So, and from our initial discussions and our meetings, we started meeting at one of the deacons' houses from St. Luke's. We would meet once a month on a Saturday, and we started preparing to kind of see our dream of doing all our children come to fruition, which it did. We're thrilled that we did, but it allowed us to work with partner churches in ways that we weren't working with partner churches before, and that we came together in a collaborative effort of 3 churches and 2 community organizations basically serving over 70% of the Worcester Public Schools, because the youth that come to ACE come from a variety of schools.
Wow, I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. Did you just say that 70% of the students in the Worcester Public Schools are touched in one way or another by this collaboration that St. Luke's is a part of?
African students, because the organization
that the African students, okay,
is the African Community Education Program. So they have students from Liberia, Ghana, Congolese, Somalia, Kenya, and a couple of other. And they all, as part of kind of coming to the U.S., they have great relationships in there. All of the students end up there, all the children, by word of mouth. They end up there, and Accentra in their resettlement program has a partnership with ACE. So our relationship with ACE puts us in relationship and community with these students. The partnerships that we made with All Saints, one of the deacons at All Saints, Beatrice Kawandi, is from Uganda, and Reverend J. Edgar Freeman is from Liberia. So not only are we coming in with support with the language, as well as the community, because the organization was already in place, ACE is already in place, our uncertainty with dealing, our comfort levels, we're supported with that. And it's been good so far. We're still kind of at our early stages, but we're finding our niche. We're finding our way.
Let's see. Vicki mentioned that when the superintendent is looking to build relationships with the religious communities, that Vicki gets a phone call. Zena or Maureen, are you seeing that dimension of sort of I mean, it's a kind of reach, it's a kind of growth, it's a kind of stepping out into the world. Are either of you seeing that kind of impact from your partnerships? Maureen's nodding yes.
I think so. So with a lot of things that have been going on lately kind of in society, Worcester has, what I'd say, recently, to the best of my knowledge, formed more of an interfaith presence in Worcester. And there was a tendency, I felt, that the Episcopal Church wasn't necessarily part of that presence, and we are now up front in that presence. We are always part of whether it's the Thanksgiving services or the prayers regarding elections or prayers regarding things that have happened in our Orlando, or any type of public awareness and public witness. The Episcopal Church is part of that. I'd like to think that some of what we're doing is making us someone that has to be invited, that has to be a part of that. There's so many different nationalities and ethnicities in Worcester. It's incredible, as well as the amount of churches. And the Episcopal Church, and the ones that I've just named, seem to be All Saints, St. Luke's, St. Matthew's is now almost everywhere. There's also a Laundry Love ministry that happens in the city of Worcester. And we are giving information to the students and the young people, and they are finding their way to Laundry Love and spreading the news about the ministries of the Episcopal Church.
How about you, Maureen? What kinds of connections to the wider community are you seeing that are growing out of the community partnership work at St. Stephen's?
I mean, the first thing that I thought of when you asked that, our last First Communion classes was all comprised of all students that were part of our after school. I think that we're seeing more, more families taking part in what we call Sunday Family Adventures. That's more tied to the congregation than to our youth programming. And it's a lot of families that don't necessarily worship in an Episcopal church, but are coming to St. Stephen's. They might be evangelical or other Christian denominations, but are spending more time with St. Stephen's. Even in the past month, we had lost a teen in our community, and our St. Stephen's, we didn't host a burial, but we're a strong presence during the wake and the funeral, and had reached out to the schools kind of in the wake of that tragedy to touch base with school leaders because of family members that were involved there. And even as St. Stephen's is kind of, I think, where people are naturally starting to gather when there is a community loss, and the schools noted to turn to us to get information and also to have it as a gathering space that the school can be a part of outside of the school community.
Vicki also mentioned the way that the comparison of visiting the two schools becomes a teaching moment, a teaching opportunity, a learning opportunity, and a learning moment for the people who are visiting to both of those schools. Zena, in Worcester, are you seeing, is that part of the dynamic? You mentioned a bunch of Episcopal churches, and I'm not familiar with the sort of social landscape of the congregations in Worcester, so I wonder if you could just clarify for me and for others on the call about whether part of that dynamic is part of what you were referring to. If it's not, then you can tell me that that's not what you meant, but I was wondering.
I'm sure I hear you clearly.
Vicki was saying that there are people who go to both schools, both the suburban school, that's where her congregation is, but the same folks also volunteer in an urban school in Buffalo, and therefore the same people are seeing very dramatically the differences in resources in the classroom, the numbers of teachers per child, the educational challenge that the classroom teachers face because of the numbers of languages that are spoken in the city schools as compared to the urban school. And when you were mentioning the churches that you're partnering with, I just didn't know whether those churches are also crossing class boundaries and whether people are seeing with their own eyes and visiting with their own bodies these kinds of justice inequities, these economic inequities that are so prevalent, but depending on where a child is born.
Yeah, I would definitely say that. And one of the advantages of working with ACE is that we're actually a suburban church for most intents and purposes. I would say there's some different classes of class levels, if you want to say that, within the church, but it's basically a suburban church. All Saints is also a relatively suburban church, but it's in the heart of the city. So it's in the middle of the city. It gets a lot of traffic based on its location. There is also, I would say, a constituency and population, African population within All Saints. It's pretty much considered our cathedral of the city. It's our largest church. And St. Matthew's is a suburban church, but it is only miles away from Main South, which is a big, what I would call urban area in which we actually have an urban minister for that area. Her name is Reverend Meredith Ward and does a lot of work in that area. So I think the awareness, it's hard not to know about the poverty and the disparities that are present in Worcester. At the same time, there's about 11 colleges and institutions that are private colleges. There's a lot of wealth and there's a lot of privilege in the city, so the disparity is quite obvious. It would be easy for a person to ignore it, and the Episcopal churches are facing it head on. We are leaning into discomfort with a deliberate effort to make a difference, and we're being supported with our other partnerships with Acentra and ACE.
Vicki, how long were your different partnerships active before you began to be able to discern this kind of impact within the community? How long did that take?
For the suburban one, it actually happened right away. It's kind of a funny story. One of the first things I did when I moved here was go to the school board meeting. And I went to the school board meeting in my collar just because I wanted to hear what was going on in the school. I knew we wanted to reach out to the elementary across the street, wanted to find out about the district. So I showed up in my collar at a school board meeting, and the whole meeting, the superintendent and the president of the board are looking at me funny. Now, I get looked at funny in my collar, but this was really pointed. When we get to the public comment, everyone else in the room who is there to comment was there to comment about a speaker who had been brought in about Islam who they were angry about. And I wasn't there to comment about that, but they all assumed I was. So after the meeting, it was a perfect opportunity to introduce myself to the superintendent and say, I'm just here because I'm the new priest. We think public education is important. We want to talk about how our church can support the school district in their work and in the role in the community and what we can do. And the next week, his secretary called to make an appointment, and he asked me to serve on a board. So that happened quickly. The Buffalo partnership took a lot longer. Part of that is because we're not Buffalo, but also because we started that partnership very slowly. With the typical way that suburban churches reach into the city, we sent stuff. And I took the superintendent or the principal of the school out for coffee, but we really sent stuff. And then over about 2 years, we began to have parishioners have a presence in the school. And at that point then, we had written a grant to the Church Periodical Club. We got a Mile of Pennies grant to put in the classrooms in the school. But because it was a gift to the school, not the children, it needed school board approval. So I had to go to 3 Buffalo school board meetings, which at that point were lasting 8 hours. Oh. And so I got 24 hours of FaceTime with the Buffalo school board. So after that, they started knowing who I was and began to develop some relationships with the school or with the church. Yeah, and I did say to them the last time, and this is one of the benefits of church-school partnership, I can say things that the school staff can't say. When they finally last approval of the donation, I said, I've spent 24 hours sitting in this room for permission to give you guys $1,000 worth of books. No publicly traded company would let their CEO spend 24 hours sitting in meetings to give away money. You might think about it. Religious people can be outspoken in a way that principals and teachers can't, because what can they do to me?
Right. Maureen, I know that the partnership between St. Stephen's and the Blackstone in particular has been going on for maybe 9 years, I'm guessing, but maybe more than that. Can you, and I know you haven't been a part of it for all that time, but do you have a sense as to how long that relationship existed before the congregation felt that it was having I'm struggling with the words because I know that St. Stephen's, none of us go into these relationships in order to benefit the congregations, but they have this effect anyway. So I'm wondering if you have a sense as to how long that relationship was going before St. Stephen's began to experience the living fruit of this kind of ministry, if I can use that language.
So we have had a formal relationship with the Blackstone for 7 years now. So that's when our partnership with them became very formalized in 2010 when the school had gone through the turnaround process, and a number of community partners were brought on. But we had an informal relationship with the school about 10 years prior to that. So we were still meeting with teachers then, and I was kind of laughing when you were speaking, Vicki, that as non-school members that we often have the luxury of being a channel where teachers and other faculty and staff and leadership members can speak a little bit more freely, or a little bit, they can say things with us that they can't say, to other teachers or things like that. So I know that even before we started our formal partnership, when we were doing teacher meetings, which had a real kind of reciprocal purpose of it helped us build a better youth program, become more aligned with what was being taught in the classroom within Boston Public Schools, and also getting feedback from the teachers of how we can better support our students in out-of-school time given their experience in school time. But we also had teachers that would stop by St. Stephen's after school because they knew that during pickup, from after-school programming, that's when they could talk to mom and dad. It wasn't at the end of the school day because obviously they're coming to us. And then as our partnership became more formalized, when we started doing these days of action, which were days of service, but also days of service with a call to action. So in addition to cleaning out rooms and painting things and taking care of the building in ways in which it wasn't being maintained on a regular basis, also challenging people to think about moving from service to doing justice. And again, what Vicki was, I think, what I was hearing in your talk in your congregation of seeing the service project is like a call for a need to work on economic justice, a need to work on public education as a social justice and issues to have a strong democracy. As we became really embedded in the school, I think it took about, in like the second year of us running programming within the school to really see a change. And that I think that's when the heavy lifting of the partnership really started to pay off, that we were able to make things happen with less work on our end. We saw the school turning to us more as a resource to get things done, not just to provide help, but to see us as more of an equal partner.
So
I will say one thing about
yes, go ahead.
Partnership. You really have to build trust with the people in the district because they assume that you really want to do this to proselytize the kids. And you have to be patient and meet them where they are and build the trust. And it's got to come from the church side. We have to work on establishing the trust. We don't get it. I tell churches that want to start these, think about growing trees, not corn. You're not going to see immediate growth. It's going to take a long time to do the groundwork, then to be able to see the benefits.
Thank you for
that. I would totally agree with what Vicki is saying. And also the ministry of presence, as well as parishioners addressing any levels of uncertainty or discomfort. We also are showing the children and the youth and helping them with their levels of comfort with people who may be different from them or in their ability to understand what's going on in the U.S. if they're recently settling here. So I don't want to underestimate the ministry of presence. I think it's a very important part, especially when you're dealing with high school students, because they know you don't actually have to be there, right? You don't have to be there on a Saturday. You don't have to teach them leadership skills. I mean, if you're a lawyer, you don't have to explain what that's like. You don't have to give free legal services as part of your, they get that. So I think that's a very important piece of it.
Thank you. Can any of you talk about liturgical impacts or effects that these relationships and this partnership and this way of being in your community has had on your congregations? Are you seeing anything different in any dimension of your worship?
Only in that we do a large school supply collection at the beginning of the school year, and then we do a new book for every student at Christmas time. And so for both of the services where we bless those, the sanctuary is full of stuff. And so it's a really cool connection to people who maybe can't go during the school day because they work. It's a way for them to really feel involved. But it does disrupt worship a bit. The last time we blessed books, there were so many books that I had to move the choir because there wasn't space for both the choir and the books. So I think it's really important to include the partnership in liturgy, because not everybody's able to get to the schools, and letting them see a tangible thing. The principal at School 6 came to the school supply blessing this fall, which was a surprise to me. I wasn't expecting her, but that also let me introduce her to the community and let people kind of make a connection to who can't get to the school.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to highlight something that Vicki just said, and that is the ways in which it's a good idea to have lots of opportunities for people in the congregation to find their way in, to broaden the number of people in the congregation who have a connection, and to extend beyond just those who can be there in the classroom. Vicki, I want to ask you this question, and then we can give the others a chance to reflect on it. When people express an interest in your partnership ministry, why are they drawn to it?
It really seems to come from two different places. First of all, I have a congregation full of retired teachers or grandparents, one or the other, or sometimes both. But so some connection with education, either through that being their vocation and their profession, or through being a grandparent. The other is people really are looking for a way to make a difference in the world, and this is a way to make a difference in the world. And it's the nice thing about school partnerships is that you can divide what you need people to do up into really manageable chunks. You know, we need an hour a week of your time from 8:30 to 9:30. We need 25 books. We need a backpack full of supplies. And so it's really manageable for people, but they can see that they're making a difference. So School 6 has done a lot of work on literacy, and we're a small part of that, but we were able to announce at the end of the school year last year that every single kindergartner in the school was reading at grade level at the end of the year. And like I said, we're a small part of that, but everybody could feel like they were a part of that. And that's really amazing for a school where kids come in not speaking English. So,
Zena, can you reflect on that same question? When people express an interest of some sort in the partnership ministry at St. Luke's, what are they drawn to?
Well, it was an interesting thing because we started bringing in speakers to talk about different opportunities, and All Our Children was one, Accenture was one, ACE was one. So the collaboration was very good. And what I think the biggest thing that comes out of it is that there's so much bias that we live with. And it is so easy to dehumanize people, whether it's through things that are going on in social media. But there's this very humane element about doing this type of ministry. There's this very real connection, even if limited, with tapping into how we are alike more than we are different. And people yearn for that. They yearn to make a difference. They yearn to know more. And there's some discomfort also. And it's a safe way to engage and make a difference. And people feel good about that. They want to do.
Maureen, do you have anything to add from your experience at St. Stephen's to what Zena and Vicki have said?
Yeah, I think echoing a lot about what Zena and Vicki had said, but I think that when people express interest in working in schools, it's usually because of some, I really like how you put it, Zena, in finding this real humane connection in this type of ministry. So it's people that are reaching out because of some relationship that they already have, a relationship that they want to deepen. It's because they have a kid at the Blackstone, they have a kid in BTS, it's because they're a staff member at the youth program and they want to see the school succeed. They're a parent, they're a grandparent, they're college students that are interested in learning more about public urban education, more than just what they're learning in the classroom. And it's a lot of suburban churches and partner churches that want to stay engaged and want to stay relevant and want to bring vibrancy to their congregation as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And that brings to a close this portion of our webinar. We're now going to turn to Mary Liz and see what questions she has for you all from our participants who've been listening in. Mary Liz, to you.
Thanks, Lally. It's been great chatting with all of you over in the chat room. So one of our first questions, just sort of a logistical question from Monique Ellison, and that's, she asked this specifically of Vicki, so I'll let Vicki answer first, but I'd love to hear from all of you on what your congregation size is.
Our average Sunday attendance runs between 100 and 110. So we're a comfortable sized church, but not a large church by any means. And of that 110, anywhere between 25 and 40 are children. So we have a really large children's ministry. So that's who we are.
Thank you. Zena, how about you go next?
Yeah, so we have a relatively small church, and it's divided into 2 services. So we're looking at 30 to 40 parishioners per service. The forums that we've been doing in between has been wonderful because it's allowed us to come together and have discussions and find things that we're equally passionate about, but also to build closer relationships between those 2 services to do ministry. Our youth population is very small. I would say maybe 10 youth attend our church. Of course, on holidays that number increases. The irony is that there's a large educational background in the church. We have a lot of college professors. We have people who are retired teachers, people who've been principals of schools, whether private or public. So there's a large educational interest within our congregation.
Wonderful. Thanks. And Maureen, I think I heard you mention something about 75, but I'm not sure if that's the current size of the congregation or if you mentioned that it had grown.
We have about 90 that come for services every Sunday, but we really see our congregation, our community, in the more than 200 kids that we see on a daily basis, be they Episcopal or not, if they wear a hijab or not. There's over 200 young people that come in and out of our building, plus their families on a daily basis. So, I mean, since opening our doors as a youth program 17 years ago, we've really seen a huge growth in the community since then.
So this question, I think all of you can probably speak to this question. So you are currently working with churches who are larger than this. One of our participants, Winnie, is from a very small church, 20 to 30 ASA, and her church and another church have been approached by a local middle school to become involved, and they're wondering sort of what they can do with their limited capacity, and so ideas about how to leverage smaller efforts in congregations would be really helpful for her. Go ahead, Vicki.
Oh,
All right, Zena, you start. We'll go to Vicki next.
I consider our church relatively small in number and the combination of the two services. But once again, we did reach out to other churches. I would start by finding out what the school wants, what the school's needs are. And then once you know what the school's needs are, then you can see how you could best meet those needs or to even start to meet those needs. And sometimes that might include partnering with another organization like we did that's better suited to do that, but you're still part of the equation.
That's exactly what I was going to say, was ask the school what they want, and they'll probably give you a list, and you can pick the things that you can do, but doing something. And sometimes it only takes one or two people. The first thing that School 6 asked us to do was to send 4 people down to man the cotton candy machine and the popcorn machine at the field day. So we weren't asking for huge amounts of time, but that's really it.
Right, or big numbers of people. That's only 2 people, right? And I'll also say, Winnie, I think you mentioned you're in New Hampshire, and we've been in a lot of contact with your diocese, with Bishop Hirschfeld and with Tina Pickering in his office about the new Our Kids Commission. And they have some funding opportunities, and they're doing a lot of research into this type of work. So if you haven't reached out to them or you haven't been in touch with the Our Kids Commission, I'm sure they would really love to hear from you. And there are other people in your community and in your diocese who are interested and who have the same kinds of questions. And so there's also a local network around this topic for you. And if you want me to directly introduce you because you haven't reached out to them yet, just leave a note in the chat box, and I'll make sure to send that email first thing tomorrow. That's great. I'm glad to hear that. So, yes, the schools and what they need, that's a great place to start. Okay, let's see here. Other questions for you all. I'm going to give everyone a minute to see if they've got anything else. But I have one. We've talked a lot about the growth that you've all seen and how expanding these ministries have been to your churches over varying lengths of time. You've all been doing this, different amounts of time, and your congregations have. But I'd love to hear a little bit about some barriers or challenges that you've met in your congregations to growing these partnerships and to experiencing the growth that they've had, any pushback you've had. Give some folks who are exploring this ministry, a realistic look at what they might be up against.
I can,
great,
I can start.
Go for it.
I think that just like reflecting on the past year, a challenge that I've sometimes come up against is like volunteers jumping in a little bit too eagerly. So I really appreciated, in response to the last question, Zena and Vicki, the first thing you said was like, see what the school wants, really get a feel for what their needs are. From other partner churches that are interested in working with us, I'll sometimes interact with volunteers that come in saying like, well, I volunteered at another school and like, here's what these kids struggled with. And speaking in very blanketed statements where I was like, I'm really interested to hear where you came up with those assumptions in the first place, but also like just because you've worked in another urban school that is not reflective of the Blackstone. You haven't stepped foot in there. I don't think that you can paint those students with that broad brush. So I think at least on my end in working with partners that are interested in coming in, working with them to really stress meeting the school where the school is, and coming in as a learning experience, and to work with the children, work alongside the kids, work alongside the teachers, and not coming in to help or to fix and do that sort of work.
Two things were big obstacles. One was actually getting people to go down into the city. Thought that, we were sending them to Alter Mongolia or something. One person actually asked me if his car would be safe parked in the neighborhood. where the school is. And so actually getting people to go down the first time and discover that that's okay was a big thing. The other thing I will say is that when you're dealing with, particularly an urban school with pre-K to 8, and you're the group that's always going to be there. You know, we're not going to go away. So they put us sometimes on the back burner. We're the least important thing going on in their day. And so it takes longer to get answers to things. It takes longer to get things set up. The first year that we were going to volunteer at School 6, we sent the list of volunteers to the school in October. It took until March for the school to get back to us that they had done everything they needed to do at their end to let us come in. And you know, that's really frustrating for people, particularly for people who are used to being in charge and making things happen, which is a lot of the Episcopalians. So teaching patience.
Yeah, and I would say overcoming some concerns around age. So we have an older congregation, you know, 40 might be the average age and upwards. And as a result of that, I mean, we do have people younger than 40, but I mean, I would say that's the average age and upwards. And you're dealing with youth and young people, and they're spontaneous and impulsive. And so just kind of, and that's why I keep talking about comfort levels so much, and uncertainty. And the partnering with the organization was a great idea, and we really took our time. So when I say we really took our time, we're really in the emerging stages. But our planning stage was 5 months, making sure people were going to commit, making sure we were building relationships with the organizations that we were working with, making sure that the public school wouldn't have challenges with us being with the children. I mean, there were numerous levels. We had to be very, very deliberate, and we made sure that the commitment wasn't overwhelming, that people didn't feel like they had to give up something to participate, that there were options in their ability to participate, that they didn't feel guilted into it, something that they wanted to do. And that if it was too much, they could say, this isn't working for me, and that was okay too.
So we're just about ready to transition, but I wonder, Mary Liz, if you have another question or two that we could address briefly before we move on.
So we've had a couple of people ask the question about what kind of training volunteers need, and I'm just going to say from all of our experience on all our children's side with training, that as a church, as a congregation, safe church training is always mandatory if you're going to send church volunteers into a school, but that it's also imperative that you ask your school contacts about any district requirements for sending adult volunteers into a school, and any training that they require. And if they come back with an I don't know, I'm not sure, I don't think so, to do double due diligence and check directly with the district to see if they have any requirements, because sometimes schools never had volunteers, or they've had people come in and they haven't really done their work with vetting them because they're just trying to get bodies in the door, or people say we're coming in. So that research is important for you as the church to do, and to be clear with people who are interested in volunteering. I know BPS, and Maureen can nod her head, BPS has a very organized volunteer training program. Vicki, I think the folks in Buffalo said that they also do. Dina, I'm not sure about Worcester Public Schools. But if they have volunteer training, you should just nod your head. So that's our experience with volunteer training, is that definitely do your research and ask the questions of the school and the district. I think that works.
The other thing I'll say about training is if your school is multicultural, some kind of introduction to the cultures they're likely to encounter is really helpful. It really freaked a lot of my volunteers out the first year to discover that there are kindergarten children wearing hijab. And we have kindergartners in full hijab. And so especially the male volunteers didn't really know how to cope with that. And so just some kind of introduction to the different cultures they're likely to encounter is really helpful.
Great point. That makes me feel like I need to look up some quality cultural competency training to refer people to.
I'd say in addition to that, we try to do some trauma-informed training we also have social workers that we're able to refer to, but setting boundaries for volunteers in terms of like what relationships are and are not appropriate to have with students, just things like if they're going to be consistent, to be consistent, so to not set young people up with expectations that they'll see them on a regular basis when they won't, but also to be honest with the kids of like, I'm here at these times, and not extending beyond those boundaries. Another function of training besides building the competency of your volunteers is when you have them on like a monthly basis or another regular basis is just building relationship within your volunteer community so that they can share their experiences and grow together, and really building community so that they're knowing that other people are in this work along with them as well. It goes a long way.
Great, thank you all.
Schools do have query checks or background checks depending on the amount of time that you'll be in the school.
Great. So I want to just take, thank you all. As we begin to move towards closing, I want to ask our participants and panelists both, as you want, to use the chat box for our evaluation. So get your fingers on your keyboard, and please everybody can type simultaneously. The two questions that we'll be asking, we'll do them one after the other, but the first question will be, what did you enjoy about the format tonight? How we presented this? What worked well for you? And then we'll spend a moment asking for your advice about what we might do differently next time, because we are always learning. So type away. What did you appreciate? What worked well this evening? I want to say, while multiple attendees are typing into our chat box, I want to say a very personal thank you to Vicki, to Zena, and to Maureen for your availability and your willingness to share from your experience and be with us this evening. Thank you each very much. And also, while people are typing, and if you've already told us what you think worked, you can shift your attention to suggestions for what we might do differently. But I want to remind people that we will send you an email with a link. This webinar has been recorded, so you can listen to it again if you want to learn from it, and you will be able to share the link. Anybody who has the link can go in and listen to it. It's not locked or private. It's a public access to anyone who has the link. And similarly, next month we will be our next webinar will be Tuesday, January 24th, and our topic is Education Equity as Racial Reconciliation. And again, we will be promoting this through our newsletter, through the Province One New England newsletter. And anybody who has the link is welcome to participate. We'd love to have more people from around the country, more people from individual partnerships. If you want to get a team of people, you can have lots of folks from your own local context on the call, or spread the links, the word far and wide to people that you know. So you can keep typing. Mary Liz is putting up some social media connections and ways for you to follow us and work with us. I also want to say a thank you. In addition to thanking our panelists, I thank each of you as participants for being here with us tonight. The work that you do is incredibly important as we, as church, learn how to be and live into being the fullness of God's presence in the world, especially at these confusing times in our social fabric of our nation. I think having our partnerships is work that we can do together by putting the children at the center of our hearts, of our attention, and of our work. So thank you all for being with us this evening, and good night.
Good night.